Update on the car, obviously everything is running mint again. We're going to be back on the dyno with this thing on the 21st of this month, so here this upcoming Thursday, as this is Sunday right now. So I got Tuesday, half day, we're going to prep the car. I just want to go back over the suspension, double check my coilover since I did spend some time lowering the rear end down. Since this bad boy kind of sat like a truck with the new Ford Stars on it, but I ended up basically lowering the coilovers all the way. I'm already on the very top adjustment hole on the G-force bolt-in and weld-in relocation brackets that I have in the car. I'm still pretty pleased with the fitment. I'm sure it's going to settle a little bit more once the springs find a new home on the coilover perches and the seats, but it's pretty darn good so far. But yeah, as you can see, we are completely bottomed out on it. Thankfully, it didn't really bother anything else as the rest of the drivetrain geometry back here. The axle angle is a-okay. I might need to go ahead and realign the rear end of the car, take it over to my buddy Justin, and have him dial out some of the negative camber that's associated with going this low-ish on a GTO. As you can see, it's very, very, very slightly picking up the very outer tread on the car. I did have some very other slight issues with the car. I did figure out what the electrical issue was. That was a simple CAN bus signal gauge to my oil pressure gauge there in the dash that got interrupted. I don't know if maybe it rubbed on the inside of it. I've moved the wiring around, double checked the harness, and it seems to be a-okay for now. But it was just barely unplugged from the right-hand gauge up here on the dash. My oil pressure gauge that runs off of the factory pressure sensor on the back top of the block. And it seems to be a-okay thus far. I haven't had any other issues, although I did end up actually swapping in that new ABS module. But I did have some other issues. Now I have an ABS light because I believe that's a manual or an automatic transmission ABS module if they are actually specific. So I'm going to go ahead and put my old ABS module back in it either this afternoon or on Tuesday when I spend just a little bit of time prepping the thing. But I did actually have a complete loss of throttle position sensor, which was super weird, never happened on the car before. But as you can see, I had my wife's nicely decorated laptop in there and ended up just doing a TPS auto set through the Holly. I found the little connector lock was actually a little bit loose. I don't remember it doing that, but I never had an issue with it before. I did go to a show and had the hood open, and there were a bunch of little kids there from a town north of here, actually where my shop is at. And I don't know, maybe somebody messed with it, maybe I'm just losing my mind, but that issue is fixed. Now the car runs and drives mint. For the issue where the car just refuses to make more than 700 wheel horsepower for some reason. It'll make a mountain of torque, but it just will not make more than 700. I've been talking with a couple other people that have a lot of experience tuning, especially with Holly, blower cars, and larger cube cars. Even though this camshaft shouldn't have a whole lot of overlap, being a blower-specific cam with the right LSA for the application, we think we may still have just a smidge of overlap, and I'm actually losing some of my fuel through there because it seems to bounce around. It's not necessarily cylinder specific, but we went through a couple different sets of plugs, found out, again, it wasn't blowout. We're not having timing issues. The timing mark on the plugs is exactly where it should be. Nice and happy. We did add some fuel towards the very end, and it randomly picked up 40 wheel horsepower, so I definitely think putting a little bit of injector retard in this thing would be a good solution. I did go back through some of the footage that I had from the GoPro that I had posted previously, and it definitely is not a tensioner issue. You can't see the tensioner losing control and shaking as a bad tensioner would, so perhaps this might be just ever so slightly too long of a belt, but this part number, I can't remember the exact length off the top of my head, with this 9.1 lower on a Metco pulley and the 295 upper, which made about 19 and a half, 20 pounds on this setup. I'd have to go back through the logs. It's shaking, so obviously there's either a lack of tension at the very top of the RPM range, or maybe the belt shaking like I posted in that video before, the short one. That might perhaps just cause belt fluctuation or a loss of control in the belt. But aside from that, the car absolutely shits and gets out on the street. So I'm still pretty happy with it. Car gets better gas mileage now that we've done a lot more time tuning. It's probably spent 15 hours on the dyno in the past couple weeks, maybe the past month or so. But the new camshaft change definitely did the right thing for low-end drivability. Slipping the clutch is much nicer now. It doesn't stutter because it's not, basically blowing most of the cylinder pressure out of the exhaust. And obviously the thing Just drives nicer everywhere with the right camshaft in it. Plus, no pulley change. We picked up 2.5, 3 pounds on it. After that, I think I'm gonna actually start on this thing. So I've been looking around, and I'm a big sucker for period correctness for certain things. I don't like period correct 90s wheels. Never really thought it was a good look. But I don't ever plan on putting this car over to an LS. I would really like to keep it an LT car. Preferably, I'd also like to keep it a 4L60 just for simplicity's sake, since this already has a somewhat nice 4L60 in it since I blew the stock one up at 82,000 miles. And this one's already got a stall in it, and this one's got, again, nice parts, billet, Sun-X, sun shell in it, nice clutches, nice pump, everything. So I've actually been looking online at Powerdyne superchargers, and there's not a whole lot of these things left. There's still service parts that you don't have to put an oil feed to them like a B600 or whatever it is, the B600 or P600 Pro chargers, which was a fairly early one that some people used on LT cars, mostly F-body, since there's not a whole lot of documentation for these. But I still do have some other stuff sitting around for this. I do have a whole hood liner because this one's kind of gross, and obviously it's failed after being in the car for almost 30 years and exposed to heat and a lot of time sitting in different environments. But a Powerdyne would actually fit pretty well in this engine bay. You can get them to make anywhere between 4 and 9 pounds, which is plenty for a stock LT short block, because these things don't really hold a lot because they have a cast piston that's not necessarily the strongest thing in the world. Even though they will take RPM, they will not take a whole lot of cylinder pressure to them, or at least excess pressure. But I actually found a couple guys that have put new old stock windshield washer reservoirs. It's a factory bolt-in mount. They've wrapped them. You can run those as a water meth tank, which will utilize your factory level sensor, give you a warning on the dash, all OEM looking and functioning. If you have low water meth in it, you can utilize a pump, put it on either an IAT triggered switch on a separate circuit or possibly integrate it into the torque head. But that is definitely a possibility. And a bracket is $200, the whole discharge tube running a water meth, no intercooler, not trying to set the world on fire, just have a 375 some wheel horsepower car. It's very realistic to do that for just a couple grand, which is admittedly, especially to me being only 26, that's a lot of money. So that's going to be something to look at in the future. First and foremost, I still need to get this thing over to Scram to have their new in-house tuner that deals with all of the HP and or factory ECM stuff. Brent, he's going to take a look at it. I'm expecting somewhere in the 275 to 285 wheel horsepower range, just because, again, it's a stock LT, even though the B-bodies are the highest compression variants of those. But I have been putting miles on this. Torque head is money, shifts nicer, it's got a lot better control over everything than the factory ECM ever could. It actually runs on all 8 now, so I'm not having issues with OptiSparks doing OptiSpark things. It's just been perfect. So I do need to fix a couple oil leaks on it. It's the oil filter adapter plate. The O-ring of the gasket for that must be just gone. That's original, and I do know for sure that my oil pressure feed lines down here up to the oil cooler, factory oil cooler in the front, those are bunk, so those need to be replaced ASAP, but those are still available new old stock as nice GM, like actual legit GM crimped metal lines. So if those ones lasted 30 years before really starting to weep, as you can tell by the cardboard down here underneath the ground, then I think I could absolutely get another 30 out of another nice legit GM piece that'll be a perfect bolt up to all the actual ports and everything for the car. So I've still got my hands full, got a lot of stuff to do, and harvest is here, so the hours are going to be getting real thin here within the next couple weeks. So that's why we're scrambling to get this thing back on the dyno and see if we can make any marketable change before the winter time comes, and I perhaps look at getting a new clutch for this, since I'd like to go to a McLeod RXT, even though I've seen other people have issues. But just the Monster and this 16-pound flywheel, 18-pound flywheel just does not have the street manners I was hoping for. So I'm going to have other stuff to do this winter on this thing anyways, next to, the whole deep cleaning thing, all the suspension, the K-member, the interior, everything on the exterior that I usually do every winter. So maybe I'll have a blower on this thing sometime next year. I've been hunting around online for deals, and I already know I can get the bracket and, again, the discharge tube and a meth tank set up pretty cheap. So, I don't know, maybe we'll have something that'll run mid-low 13s in the quarter, be a really fun 8th mile car to cruise down with some friends in, but we'll see.